Revelation 2124. From the 23rd of October 1941. Spiritual knowledge, consequence of right walk before God. It remains incomprehensible to people that spiritual knowledge is the result of right conduct before God. That the human being does not become a knower by striving for knowledge through systematic schooling, but that the latter can be completely eliminated, and yet the most profound knowledge can be gained if the human being strives to live according to God's will instead of striving for school wisdom. That the right wisdom is therefore not acquired intellectually, but the heart and its feelings are decisive if the human being wants to become knowledgeable. The human being can indeed acquire human wisdom by way of intellect, yet this can only be applied in earthly life. Thus it is only useful in earthly life, but it can never increase spiritual knowledge in the slightest. Spiritual knowledge is completely independent of earthly endeavor, of earthly eagerness to learn, and the successes or results thus achieved. And therefore a person whose thinking and acting is not based in his love remains spiritually ignorant, even though he fills his life exclusively with intellectual research, for he always remains outside of the spiritual kingdom, and his knowledge of it is inadequate. For him, this kingdom is an unenlightened area, an area which in its darkness is unrecognizable to him, and which he therefore, as not existing, does not seek to explore. Consequently he does not acquire spiritual knowledge, he does not desire it, and does not do anything to make himself receptive. Hence he does not consciously work on himself, he neither seeks to ennoble his nature nor to consciously walk according to God's will, and thus his heart will also not be receptive for spiritual wisdom if it is imparted to him by his fellow human being. The person who feels and acts well and nobly is different in his entire thinking than a person who spends his life in unkindness towards his fellow human being and in self-love. The former will pay attention to everything that brings him closer to the divine Creator. He will recognize the working of a power in, around and above himself and enter into contact with this power, and thus he will be mentally made aware of God's will. That is, he will recognize the divine order and know that only life in the divine order will bring him closer to the eternal deity. And if he has the will to come closer to God, God will also come towards him, and that in the form of knowledge. Thus, life according to God's will always determine man's knowledge. Even if the human being does not consciously strive for divine wisdom, but he will not be able to think otherwise than correctly if it concerns spiritual things, things which lie outside of the earthly, which do not concern the body but its soul and spirit. And he will affirm these thoughts without hesitation. He will feel with a certain certainty that his thoughts correspond to truth and announce them to his fellow human beings. For his spirit tells him that he thinks correctly. And where loving people who strive for good come together, the exchange of thoughts will result in complete agreement, and it is already evident from this that they all walk in truth, that they have received the same mental transmission, and that they can therefore rightly call themselves knowledgeable. And the more people strive to shape themselves, that is their soul, the deeper they penetrate into spiritual knowledge. Soon there is nothing left for them that is unclear or incomprehensible. For a well-formed soul is constantly active in love. Activity of love attracts God. And God, as the eternal truth distributes it to the human being, is evidence of his love for him. And thus the human being will truly be well informed and have great knowledge at his disposal when he ends his earthly life. However, anyone who acquires earthly wisdom through study or research, who takes humanly gained wisdom into himself, will not always be in the truth. It can certainly also come to him if his attitude towards God corresponds to his will, but then it can never be attributed to intellectual pondering or research. Instead, only his way of life provides him with the knowledge of truth. and the human being takes this knowledge with him into eternity, whereas earthly knowledge remains behind or rather fades into nothingness, and a person who is highly respected on earth can enter the beyond poor in spiritual possessions as soon as he attaches too much value to his earthly knowledge and does not fulfill the preconditions which earn him spiritual knowledge on earth. Amen.